introduction with a number of several different ways. But one, I want to start by saying, I think Rushi and Bianca and I both worked really hard to try to find, we have really had male speakers, male over the last couple of years on our own line. And to be able to secure these two leading, accomplished Black women in two different areas in different parts of the world, it's just mind-boggling. It really is mind-boggling. I want to say this to you, too, in my introduction to Mary Ann, about Mary Ann, and I fondly call her that because she's a Parisian trained attorney, a lawyer, so she's highly, highly accomplished in many different ways. But I went to Morocco, and I was like, I guess most people looking for Yves Saint Laurent. I was like, oh, I want to go to that museum and all of that. And along the way, someone said, oh, do you know about this Black woman who owns this boutique hotel? So naturally, I said, oh, well, I'm going to see, two or three of us said, oh, let's see if we can be in touch with her. And she, I'm telling you, the consummate hotelier, as they call them, I guess, is that word, and a hospitality expert. She immediately, with her generosity, sent a driver out to pick us up, and we were blown away. She, the architecture, the architectural details of her place, the inviting garden, enchanting gardens, the swimming pool, the way in which, almost like the buildings talk to each other, you have that kind of feel. And to have accomplished that is, I felt, and I think we all felt at that time, was just mind-boggling. But now, let me just tell you this. Miss Mary Ann Low-Martin is a go-getter. I mean, she, and here's, I want to let you know about, so when we invited her to come here, she said, oh yeah, you know, my friend CeCe H. Pounder, who's an actor, is hosting a book signing for me at Octavia Books. And I was saying, oh yeah, well, you know, I was like, it's short notice. We better go quickly to Octavia Books and, you know, give her support. We got there. The place was packed. It was packed. People were lined up to sign for her book. Let me just say this, Inside Marrakesh. This is part of her fame, I would say. This book is now in its fourth printing in what, just a little over a year or two? Little over 2 years, it's in its fourth printing. You get a sense of her expertise around architecture, her expertise and connections with individuals, not just in Marrakesh and Morocco, Morocco, but also throughout the world. And we decided, oh, we had to have her, because this is an area where Blacks have not, African descendants have not achieved as much in terms of architecture and people knowing about the architecture and the connections across the cultures. So we were so fortunate when she said that she would come and speak to us, and she has been so generous with her time, but she's a highly accomplished attorney, now turned one of the leading, I'm telling you, I'm comfortable to tell you that she is one of the leaders, the most written about in terms of travel and leisure, Condé Nast, New York Times, every major paper. And let me just say, the last part of that is that that when I was concerned about, oh, like, well, she might not have many people there, she has already, the success of the experience at Octavia Book has already led to an article being published about her here in New Orleans. So, so I am so happy to present to you Marianne Lowen Martin, my good, I think I'm safe to say, my good friend and colleague, and we're honored to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess everyone can hear me. So first of all, I think that we all share that we should give an immense applause to Dr. Freeman. And her team, and you have no idea how humbled and moved and happy I am to be here. And I wish I had the time to meet all of you, but unfortunately it's not going to be possible. But since I arrived, it was just heaven, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So I'm going to talk about travel architecture and its influences, and it is a very personal story that has to start with my childhood and who I am. Is it right? Okay. So my mother was from the Caribbean, Parisian, but originally from Guadeloupe, and my father is from Senegal, also Parisian. And so I grew up with a sense that I was coming from very rich cultures, but have absolutely no access to these cultures because we never lived in any of these countries. And on top, for 10 years, my father was the ambassador of Senegal, and people would ask me, how is your country? And I would say, I don't know. I've never been there. So I grew up with this sense. I was never in a hostile environment, but I could feel that as much as I could understand and appreciate the various environments in which I was living, it was not my own. And it created a quest of how can I create a path to my own cultural heritage. And when we were living in Moscow, my mother, who didn't want me to live like a diplomat child in a bubble, would tell me every morning, open your eyes, open your ears, and remember everything. So from the age of 7 to the age of 10, this became like a daily mantra, and it made me a very precocious child. And it was very strict communist era. And what was in my face was constantly architecture, because you could see the old Russia, you could visit the Hermitage in what was Leningrad then, which is St. Petersburg. You could visit the old basilics of Orthodox religion. You could visit old castles of Russian aristocrats. And you also had the communist architecture, which was massive. And in my very precocious child mind, architecture became the vehicle of cultural heritage, the vehicle of history, the vehicle of identity. And I became extremely interested in architecture since I was a child, because I thought this will be my way to create my own path to my own identity. So the summer I was 10 years old, so all of this is very white. I'm living in a white world. Most of the time I'm the only African child, but it's absolutely, I never felt any hostility. And then I would go to my West Indian family who was in Paris, and I could feel the warmth of the culture through the food and the music. But what we would have to visit when my grandmother would take me out would be Chateau de Versailles, for example, which is against white history. So the summer I was 10, we did a trip. We first went to Greece briefly. I visited the Parthenon, Acropole, and then we went to Egypt, and I visited the pyramids. And then on all the illustrations, people were looking like us. And it was the first time I could see a connection between black people and architecture. And at the same time, my father, who's from Senegal, kept on talking about Cheikh Anta Diop, this very famous Senegalese scholar who dedicated his life to prove that Egyptian people were black. And when you see that the pyramids were built, was it 2400 before Christ or something like that? And that the Parthenon in Greece was probably 400 before Christ, you can see how old is black culture, which was started by black people, with an alphabet, with very strong political structure, that in a way, the kings of France were like pharaohs, because, you know, the pharaoh was the god on earth and had a whole political structure because of that. And the kings of France were just very inspired by this kind of autocracy. So at this point, I thought, really, there's nothing more interesting than starting research on vernacular architecture. And when I was 12, when I was 13, we moved to France, and we never left France, and my father went back to being a lawyer. And when I was a teenager, all of my subscriptions were about architecture, when all my friends were about, you know, girly magazines. And I discovered that in Africa, we had a lot of beautiful earth architecture. In Timbuktu, in Mali, in Sudan, and Sudan is connected to Egypt. And this was not known. I mean, this is not known by the public. I remember going to Timbuktu when I was 18 on my own, traveling in Mali. Big struggle with my family because they thought I was crazy. And Timbuktu is spectacular. And other places of Mali are spectacular. And it's not known, it's not on the map. So this takes me to the way Europeans have manipulated our cultural heritage. Because, you see, Europeans have fashioned in a way through colonialism, at the colonial times, tourism in Africa. And tourism in Africa is reduced to beaches and wildlife. It's never about the culture of the people, never. So it is about time that we claim our cultural heritage. And one thing which really struck me later when I came to Morocco was that I was not especially interested in the history of Spain, but the Moors, who were people from the continent, and many of them looking like us, occupied Spain for 7 centuries. And this is when they were kicked back to the continent. At the same time, the Queen Isabel the Catholic financed the expedition of Christopher Columbus, who came to this land. So what it meant for me, seeing the connection between Andalusia and the old architecture in Morocco, what it meant is that the chronology says that Christopher Columbus and all the other people came with 7 centuries of our cultural heritage to this continent. So when you visit a courtyard in, the architecture called Spanish colonial, it means that it's coming from our continent and that it's Muslim. So it is really interesting to see that, of course, it's more convenient to say it's Spanish because it's European, and it's Christian, it's Spanish. But in fact, it's a pure lie. And through architecture, I think that we can see how much things have been manipulated, how much they have been appropriated. And so it always, surprises me when people come to my place in Marrakesh and they say, "Oh, it reminds me of an hacienda in Mexico." I said, "Get your chronology right. It's the other way." You know, and people are surprised because they never think about it. It's not ill. Then they realize that it's obvious. It is there. If you go to Seville, if you go to Granada, it comes from our continent. And so architecture, as I was growing up, in quest of a path, a mean to express a cultural heritage which was already diverse because of the origin of and I had families from Trinidad and family from Guadeloupe, and with Trinidad there's some Spanish and English influence. So architecture for me was a mean to express this quest of identity. And also, I have to say, whether it's conscious or not, I think that our people have always found in the sphere of creativity pure freedom. Because, you know, it's a space where you are your own boss, no one owns you. And when you see how brilliant our writers and, you know, screenwriters, playwriters, musicians, painters, it's extraordinary to see the strengths of creativity which is in our community. I do regret that there are not many more architects. It seems that it's a field which was never very much in the radar. People would think, you know, if their children go to university, they should become, you know, professors, accountants, engineers, lawyers, doctors. But architect doesn't seem to be very much something where we find a lot of us. And you will wonder how I ended up being an hotelier after that. Oh, by the time, in the meantime, I was a lawyer in Paris. But I became an hotelier because, so since I was it's accidental, hotelier. Because since I was a child, I wanted to be an architect. I went to architecture school in France, in Les Beaux-Arts. I was very young. I finished senior high school at 16 and went straight to the Beaux-Arts. And everything was going extremely well. And I could feel this is what I want to do. This is what will connect me with the cultural field. I come from a family of lawyers. I'm fourth generation on my mother's side and second on my father's side. And my parents always told me, you do whatever you want because you only do well what you like. So there was no pressure for me to become a lawyer. And here I am, so happy in architecture school, every summer doing internship in West Africa, discovering the beauty and how architecture was connected with climate, and how at some point they had all of these very elaborate architecture to keep the water of the rain for dry season and all of that. I was totally enchanted and dreaming on how I could adapt vernacular rules to the quest and the needs of modern comfort. And then the French rigidity hit. So I'm in second year. I have very good grades in architecture. But to get into third year, you need to have minor credits in math, physics, and chemistry, and I'm really bad. So because of that, I could not become an architect. And I went to law school, and I became a lawyer. But I could feel that this was not the connection to my quest of cultural heritage and cultural identity. And I happened to have a professor who pushed me in a competition where 3 people out of thousands were selected, and I won that competition. And it was a competition among lawyers, and I was representing the French bar in international competitions. And I discovered Morocco, and I discovered this is where I can be building and designing things and express this interest for cultural heritage. And so people thought I was crazy because there was a red carpet in front of me as a young lawyer in France. And Morocco gave me the opportunity to do my own architecture. And I've had the extreme chance to find an architect without ego, because I gave him everything drawn by the inch, and I said, you sign this and you put it in technical form so it will have the planning consent. And this is the place where you came, Cassie. And Marrakesh is a place which is just like me at the crossroad of many cultures. Art Deco French, Arab, African from West Africa, Berber, and it is a place where I think you can be extremely diverse and at the same time extremely true to the local culture. So I built this place. I bought the land and I am very moved to be in New Orleans because I bought the land with inheritance coming down from my ancestors who were freed and who did well in life. And I built this place, which is a dialogue between nature and culture, and which has all of the influences which I believe are in me: West Africa, a little bit of Caribbean, a little bit of India. And there's nothing more moving for me, for example, if I go to West Indies, to see that old houses, look like riads in the Medina. When you walk in courtyards in the Medina, you see some details which are exactly the same that my grandmother's house in Guadeloupe had. So it really shows, as Dr. Harris was saying, that we are people of the world, because there's been this thread going around so many continents and so many centuries. And so once I had built it, of course, I had to turn it into a business, and that's why I'm an hotelier, but I'm a total accidental hotelier. And most people, the real ones, don't understand sometimes what I'm doing, because we do a lot of things with artists and writers. And so I hope that I have explained to you my journey and why architecture is a very important thing to express cultural heritage.
And now, Jasmine is fortunate to get to interview Marianne. Again, it's teacher-driven, and we're happy to have Jasmine here with us.
Does this work?
To moderate
Can
this
you hear me?
conversation.
Can you hear me? Does this work? Does it work?
Yes, it's on.
Okay, good.
Okay, so the first question I want to ask you is, as you mentioned, architecture design doesn't really have a space right now for people of color, for women of color. So as an accomplished self-starter, what advice would you have to an individual looking to get into either design or another field that is traditionally underrepresented minorities and people of color?
First of all, I'm not sure you can hear me. Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, confidence. Oh, Nikki. Oh, hi, Nikki. She came to my place. Cassie, another one. So, first of all, confidence. There's some very good young, not all young, but black designers. I can name one. Her name is Sheila Bridges, and you should follow what she does, because there's a fabric pattern very famous in Europe called toile de Jouy, and since the 18th century you had like figures on it, and she has created something called Harlem Toile, and it's about black people dancing, and it's beautiful, and she does a lot of things, and there are other very interesting young African-American designers. We still have not enough architects, and I hope that all of you teachers are going to tell young people that it's also a field that they should consider.
Absolutely. So as educators, one of the things that we strive to do is to instill confidence in our students and hopefully reach them out to new areas they hadn't thought of. How do you think that we can help incorporate more multiculturalism, more diversity to help build kind of a culture of inclusivity in our AP seminar classes?
Well, I think that it's also about telling them how much the world owes to us in terms of architecture, because when everybody goes to Andalusia and they don't even know it started on our continent. Of course, and unfortunately, the most beautiful architecture to be seen in Africa is now in countries which are of very difficult access. But with internet, you can investigate, and you can. I think that what is really important is that the same way that people have access to European cultural heritage history, we should do more research on African cultural heritage history through architecture.
So adding on to that, what do you feel like is kind of the main takeaway you want our AP seminars to leave with today from this conversation?
Well, I hope that this has brought something a bit new on the usual platform. And I hope that it also shows that the richness of our culture is immense. And there's still a lot of things which could be explored. But it always starts by believing, having confidence, and not taking any advice which would try to tell you this dream is not for you.
And if I have time for one final question, I do? Okay. You mentioned your exposure to architecture in communist Russia, the pre-Lenin architecture as well, Timbuktu, other areas. Coming from that artistic background, what do you feel like has strengthened your ability and your success in running a business as well in an entirely different field?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
So from your artistic background,
Yes.
your heritage, what do you think has helped you become such a successful business owner and operator as well?
Well, I think that what people like about our place is that it expresses this cultural diversity. It's not, I hope, and I think people feel it's not a boring place. It's not room is the same. It has tons of books, tons of art. It is really the reflection of a very diverse identity. But you were saying my artistic background. I'm the first one in my family. No one, my mother was very much into, taking me to see things, but she was a lawyer too, and no one, when I said I wanted to be an architect, they were not surprised because I was very creative, but it was not something which was usual in the family, So I think that if I had not had this childhood which put me in this permanent quest of what is really my thing, But at the same time, I was enjoying everything. It's not like I was in a frustrating position. I loved everything, but I was just looking for something which I could say, okay, this is where I come from, And so this is what I have found with architecture as a mean to express this link. Yeah.
Expressing that cultural identity.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. I think we're opening it up to questions from the audience.
Oh, have we made everybody shy?
Yeah.
So naturally, this is a topic and theme that's near and dear to me because it's so different. I mean, different in ways in which we want to have teachers and others explore more broadly the possibilities of different experiences and different professions, et cetera, in African diaspora. But I just wanted to have you reflect back on your journey to Morocco. How did you get there? How did you find that particular place that that you decided that you want to design, and you want to design that place there.
So, as I was saying, my mother was from West Indies and Guadeloupe, and my father is from Senegal, and they were living in Paris, and they wanted to have a holiday house in a place which wouldn't be further than 3 hours flight, so they could go easily. And I was already a lawyer when they were talking about that, but they knew I was a frustrated architect. So at some point I told them, if you're serious about this project, I want to be in charge. And Morocco is close to France. And if there's people like Yves Saint Laurent who have a house in Marrakesh, it means that the place must be special. So I called a friend of mine who had a house in Marrakesh, and I asked him if he could open doors if I was going to go there to explore looking for land. And I went there in December '85. From the moment I set foot on the tarmac, I fell in love with the place. Immediate, like, you know, almost violently, just like, this is what I've been looking for forever, you know? And then I did a project for my parents. I found a piece of land, they came, they liked it, they bought that land. I did a project for them, and I turned it into a business. And all of this, I had no idea of what I was doing. No business plan, no business model. And the project became such a success that between 92 and 2000, I was published in 96 magazines, you know, big spreads in all the possible magazines. And I did not even understand what was happening. You know, I had always culture. I was coming to Marrakesh once a month to work on the construction site. And if I had not been introduced by this friend to people having houses in Marrakesh, so I discovered the real Marrakesh, which is the hidden one behind the doors, and the one which is matching the legend that exists in Paris about Marrakesh, I would have thought, what a boring place, because it's a place which really needs to be discovered behind the off the beaten track, let's say. And then what you could see was of no interest after a few days. I had the idea to create hospitality, which was connected to the real culture of the place. And I turned my parents' house into the first boutique concept in Marrakesh, and it was crazy. Honestly, I couldn't understand. The first people came, and then it never stopped. And then later, I moved permanently to Marrakesh in '96, because then I was still a lawyer. So I was running both business, and it was fax time. And when I would arrive home from the office, there would be miles of faxes of people coming from South Carolina, coming from New York, coming from Vienna. We want to go to this place, when is it available, you know? And so in '96, we left Paris for good, we moved to Marrakesh, and I decided to look for land and to create my own place. And that's, in a nutshell, what happened. But I talk about it like this, but you know, when I started, my hair was pitch black. So it means it was a very stressful journey.
Thank you so much for the talk. Really interesting. I suppose my question, as you outlined, you know, that Africans were in Spain. So oftentimes when we think about the African diaspora, a lot of our focus is on the Americas, the diaspora being formed as a result of transatlantic enslavement. But actually, what you're speaking about really broadens our horizons, and also thinking about then the contribution of Africans to European civilization. So I wonder whether you want to speak about what are the implications of that for our understanding of the African diaspora. As you say, the fact that Africans were contributing to Spanish civilization and to European civilization?
Well, this is a story that we have to tell because after they were kicked back to the continent, it's the white narrative since centuries which has been predominant. So until we claim back our history and tell it ourselves, you know, it will not be, I would say, totally impartial. And I don't remember what African country has this saying that the day the lion will say the story and not the hunter, truth will be there, you know? So it's about the same. So I hope I answer your question, but I think it is our duty now that we have the means to do the research and to speak, it is our duty to, especially now, and I guess we all know what I'm thinking about, especially now, it is extremely important to claim the incredible contribution that we have made in all fields, not only literature, not only music, but in all fields.
Marianne, Dawn, can you hear me? You can hear me. I had the privilege the other day to listen to the interview that you gave about the book that Cassie just told us about. I have not had an opportunity to read it, but I was enthralled by much of what you described, and those of us, most of the folk had the book then, some of the houses that are in other structures, the swimming pool, the this and the other. So I went out and bought the book because I was so, can you articulate some of the interior kinds of things that you have that's now in this wonderful book?
So, yeah, so as I was saying, Marrakesh is a very cosmopolitan city in a way. It's a place where you can be in like 15 minutes from the center, not far around my hotel. You can be in places which looks like biblical images. Then you can be in the old part of town and it's like the Middle Age, and you can be in a very modern part of town where you will have Kentucky Fried Chicken. But it doesn't impact the local culture. So my book was a tribute to the cosmopolitan, I mean, there's no other city on the continent which has the same type of people having homes there, you know? And it's very international, but at the same time, it keeps its culture very, very strongly. It's not international in the sense that it has become bland. You know, it's not, may I say Florida? And so it is very much, it's a place which has a very strong identity, and it also expresses within Moroccan family. You can have one cousin who is dressed in a way I would find a bit shameful, with, you know, everything way too short and a lot of skin out. And she's walking on the street with her cousin who is entirely veiled and wear the hijab. And they're from the same family. So what is important in this country is that you have a constant mix of extremes, but in a very friendly way. So my book was about showing how people from different cultural heritage can be inspired by Moroccan style and mix it with their own. So all the houses except two, all the houses belong to foreigners, French, British, Belgians, Italians, Americans. And the two Moroccan houses belong to painters because they are showing their work regularly in the US, and I wanted to show also some very cosmopolitan Moroccan creatives. So the book, if you get the book one day, you will see that it's my very personal path through my own path, which is very cosmopolitan and very diverse. And I have mixed this with this quest of seeing how other people who don't have the same genetic diversity that I have, you know, they're 100% British, 100% Italian, they have gone for their house in Marrakesh themselves through the path of inclusion and diversity. So this is the context.
I also noticed yesterday as we moved about the city, the gleam in your eyes as you walked about the foliage, the gardens here and that kind of thing. And you told us about your experiences, and you saw some of the distinctive relationships in some of these beautiful gardens here in New Orleans. So can you just for a minute?
Well, you know, it's true that as we were driving, I can see a lot of things which are of Moorish influence because it's so Spanish colonial everywhere here, you know. And at the same time, you have a very lush vegetation here because over there it's very dry and here it's very humid. So I kept on taking photos and sending it to my husband, who's passionate about plants, and I was telling him, look how healthy the cycads are on the street. You know, think about how much it costs us to buy one, and here they're all over on public spaces, you know. So yes, I can feel a very strong link here with a Moorish influence in the gardens because, you know, in the Muslim civilization, women have to be hidden. And whether it was in North Africa or sometimes in other countries like Persia, the gardens became a space of freedom, a space of poetry, a romantic space where people could, you know, talk about love and poetry. And the gardens in Marrakesh are extremely important, but at the beginning of the 19th century, the Medina was called the Garden City. And because of the demographic pressure, now there's very, very tiny pockets of green within the old Medina. But it's true that the symbol of the garden is a symbol of poetry and freedom in many, many Islamic countries. Yeah.
Well, this will be the final question.
Hi. Sorry, that was very loud. I have a quick question. And first of all, I apologize. I'm completely ignorant in terms of architecture beyond what I look at and think is really cool. So I'm at a very base level for understanding. But you had said that in order to change the narrative from being completely white and European, people such as yourself need to take over the telling of that story. Earlier, Dr. Harris had mentioned something similar in the world of food and whatnot. And she had mentioned that the space was expanding. And I was wondering, are you noticing a similar expansion in storytellers such as yourself? And like I said, I'm completely ignorant, so I don't know. But are there more diverse storytellers in the area of architecture? Are you noticing a similar expansion? Is the space expanding there as well?
Well, I do hope, but remember, I never graduated, so I cannot speak as an architect, you know? I'm an accidental architect, an accidental hotelier. The only thing I hope is not an accident is sitting on this chair speaking to you. But, so I think that from the moment the young people will understand that architecture is also a field for them, then the narrative will start changing. Because for so long, you know, like art history, architecture, it was something considered for white people. Not, you know, I'm a young black person growing up, and this is something for white people. This has to change because our ancestors were there and they were building and they were designing. So there's no reason why we should not claim this heritage. You know, I'm a bit too old to be doing it myself, but I hope that a lot of young people will do that and that their teachers will show them the path.